Let's bring in George Sillis and sound the confetti and the horns for $5 trillion market cap for NVIDIA. I know they have a developers conference, and that's brought some optimism there. Good morning, George Sillis. You're also taking a look at Boeing with their latest news. Your thoughts?
Yeah, so I mean, just looking at the price action in Boeing, it's drifting to the downside. I think overall the quarter was quite good, at least from the standpoint of what's going on with their backlog. But they did report essentially a miss on EPS, posting a $7.47 loss. They were expecting to only lose around $2.38, which was both alongside the miss better than last year, where the company lost over $10 a share. Sales were higher, and this is where actually some good news is for Boeing, by over 30% to $23.3 billion, higher again than the $17.8 billion of the same quarter last year. Commercial aviation business was higher by 49%, so that's their bright spot, which represents the majority of their sales, about 70%. Defense was higher, 25%, as well as the global services higher by over 9%. But the kicker is they did talk about the backlog, which is still tremendous, $636 billion, over 5,900 units, at least on the commercial side. But they did take a $4.9 billion pre-tax charge for the quarter, and that explains the miss on EPS. And that was due to some production or program delays for their 777 program. So again, some good news. Revenues, divisional breakdown was great. Backlog was higher, but unfortunately for the company, they did take another charge, and that's putting some pressure on the shares, as you can see, by about 2% to the downside.
Yeah, but Boeing shareholders are still happy over 1 year. It's up over 40% in 1 year, so still looking pretty good. Let's talk about Caterpillar. Let's run through those numbers.
Yeah, it's still running as the markets open up. It was actually a really good report for the overall business. They reported $4.95 a share on an adjusted basis, but that was down 4% compared to last year, beating the estimates, which are around $4.50. Last year, they owned $5.06, and most of this was due to some tariff impact that the company actually adjusted their expected earnings for the quarter. So they beat the revised lower guidance that the company provided based on some tariff impacts, which is a good sign. The other thing is, if you look at sales, they were higher by 10% at $17.6 billion versus $16.77 billion. They also talked about how the construction industry, construction and industrial segments, higher by about 7%, and energy and transport was higher by 17%. So that's a bright spot in the underlying business. Backlog also increased by another $11.2 billion. And they also increased their fiscal outlay or fiscal year revenue slightly to the upside. Alongside with that, they did talk about $1.5 billion tariff impact to the top line sales, but nonetheless, they also increased their dividend as well as share buybacks by another $1.1 billion.
All right, and last but not least, let's take a look at Verizon. And by the way, I'll jump in and just say I heard Verizon is really helping folks in Jamaica and providing free everything for folks in devastated Jamaica. So I was happy to hear that this morning. I don't know what it means for shareholders. I'm sorry I didn't look at the money side of it, but I thought it was thoughtful. Let's talk about the 4% move this morning.
Yeah, so it looked like it was, starting to pull back prior to them open. We're actually seeing some nice move back to the upside on Verizon. Now, they just fractionally beat the EPS estimates. They came in at $1.21 versus $1.19, but this is pretty significant compared to 78 cents that the company reported in terms of earnings for the same quarter last year. But here's the kicker. Sales actually were down $33.82 billion, missing by about $500 million, but they were still higher in terms of total sales by about 1.5% compared to last year. A couple of things to note: they talked about their consumer unit, which was down about 7,000 subs, but their broadband division actually increased pretty significantly to over 306,000 new subs for the quarter. But at the same time, their business services division saw additional 110,000 subscribers. So there was some weakness in their consumer division, but at the same time, I think their broadband and business units also made up for that. Plus, they also provided full-year guidance update for top-line sales as well as they expect a recovery in their consumer wireless division between 2 and 2.5% for the remaining part of the fiscal year. So it's a little bit of a weak quarter in the consumer segment, but nonetheless, the enterprise segment made up for it.
Yeah. All right, George Still, it's a good look there at some key names on Wall Street. Thank you, George.